Ladies and gentlemen, we are now covering Season 7, Episode 11, Not Asking for Trouble. This is the episode in which Pinkie Pie goes up to Yakyakistan. It's the first time we actually see Yakyakistan proper. And she's there, and everything's awesome, and they're all awesome to have her. Snowslide. And I'd call it a landslide, but, you know. I call it an avalanche, but, I mean, avalanches are terrifying. Have you ever seen an avalanche? So there's the snow, and now they have to deal with it, and the yaks are, we'll skip over that part, and then they end up helping him the end. So, this episode, as always, I like to give a little bit of a brief thing right at the beginning. This isn't as bad as I remembered. I don't think I'll ever seek out rewatching it, but it is not as bad as I remembered. I'll give it that. Because not only was the resolution not as face-palming as I remembered, but the development wasn't either. This was by someone whose name I don't remember, because it's someone new. This is once again... I'm gonna be laughing when we're finally done with this. Is once again another repeat episode by May... the opposite of a repeat episode. A one-off episode by May Chan, who is one person who's written one episode. So far, of course. By the way, for those of you who look at this spreadsheet, it's just funny because we've got, like, you know, Michael P. Fox and Will Fox, David Rapp, Michael Vogel, Kevin Burke, Chris Doc Wyatt. And then we just have this stretch of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people who've all written one episode. It's become a bit of a trend. But let's get into the episode proper. There's this bit where Pinkie Pie is going, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. She's channeling her inner rainbow for a moment. Applejack shows up and says, we were hearing a lot of oh my goshing and weren't sure if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Not to start this episode on a downer, but that's actually a good thing to have if you've dealt with bad things in your life. At this point in my life, I have been through so many horrific, mind-destroyingly, life-shatteringly catastrophic and evil, horrible events that at this point, if I say to one of my family members or friends, hey, we need to talk, and don't add, don't worry, it's nothing bad, they will immediately freak out and presume it is. And I don't blame them, because duh, right? So it's nice to have that little addendum of, don't worry, it's not a bad thing. Or, don't worry, it's nothing very terrible. So Pinkie Pie sends 17 scrolls. Yeah, it's about Pinkie's usual level of subtlety. Pinkie then points out that Twilight can officially do stuff. Allow me to point out that that's absolutely correct. The title of Princess is exactly that. It is a title. And while the political infrastructure of Equestria is certainly loose, it does still exist, as I've pointed out several times. Twilight does have official standing and can make official orders as effectively an officiate of state. I only point that out because it's funny to me that Pinkie, of all people, is, I believe, the first person to actually point this out. There might have been someone before her, I'm not actually sure. But I do know Pinkie pointing it out here makes sense. After all, Pinkie is an extremely organized person and is the kind of person who would absolutely be on board with stuff being official. Right? There's the old story, oh, I bought them with just a title. But she's the kind of person who would absolutely be bought by just a title. Now, Roz is correct. Yeah, absolutely. Twilight doesn't run anything just yet, unlike Cadence or the other two. Yet. I don't know if she ever does. That is a presumption on my part. But I've noticed over the last several seasons that bit by bit, Twilight's been getting more and more little hints of actual responsibility. And I'm just curious if this is yet another of those, or if this is just Pinkie being Pinkie. Both are feasible. It could actually be both. Who knows? Yeah, I agree with Braidwood, by the way. Pinkie would actually do surprisingly well in politics, especially with how organized she is, because she would keep notes on her political rivals and her political allies. This sounds like a joke, but I want you to imagine, for those of you who don't know how stuff works here in the States, I don't know how this works in other countries. You got the Senate, and you got the House of Representatives, right? Now, the thing is, while the Senate does stuff and the House does stuff, that's the big stuff. That's the high-level stuff. There's a lot of everyday kind of stuff happening, and that's usually in committees. That's where, this is getting a little bit polemic, but most of the real power, the practical day-to-day operation of the country power is in those committees. Now imagine you have someone like Pinkie Pie who knows what they like and how to approach them and how to get people on her side and get them into a good mood for when they go to the committee to decide such and such or what you fig with regards to the latest bill with regards to electric utility standards or how we should tax, gas pipe stuff and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly, Russ. She would have a list of their favorite desserts. She would bring stuff, cater stuff to the meetings. She would absolutely schmooze, and she would be really good at it. I know that's a weird tangent. I'm just saying. Side note, I like how the official friendship ambassador badge is made out of Discord's friendship bookmarks from all the way back when they made the tree. That's a nice little touch. So, we get to Yakyakistan. Stomping relaxes the yaks. Actually, that makes perfect sense. One of the things I've talked about many times, both on the show and with regards to real life, is it's good to have a healthy form of venting, right? Healthy venting is something more people need, to be blunt. And a healthy outlet, a healthy Mr. Red. That's important. I would say it's mandatory for being legitimately... I keep using this word over and over, and I'm sorry, for being healthy. Because not only does it help you with your HP, so to speak, and your status, but it prevents you from venting in a bad way, because eventually you're going to vent, right? And that's how people blow up. That's how people yell at friends or family or loved ones or kids. That's how people punch the walls. That's how people get into car accidents, right? Anyways... Even healthy venting can be taken too far. I'm not gonna say the example I just thought of, so I gotta think of another one. Give me a second here. I suddenly can't come up with another example. I've failed here at coming up with another example of healthy venting. God, I don't know. Okay. I'll use myself. I like punching things, right? Hear me out. I don't like punching things that hurt, right? It was sex, Mr. Red. I don't like punching things that hurt, right? I don't want to damage anything. But having like a punching bag, and I've got my boxing gloves right there. So, boom, 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 boom. Now, if I do that too much or too hard, that will not only cause me physical damage because of the repetitiveness of it, and my elbow issues, but I can also damage both the gloves and the bag, right? So there you go. Even a healthy form of venting can be taken too far. So, snow slide. We also had a Wilhelm yak in the background. By the way, I'm going to get back to you, Mr. Red. I just don't want to lose my train of thought here. So, am I the only one who feels that Prince Rutherford is specifically written like a child who thinks they're clever? I'm going to point out a couple of specific examples of this as we go throughout the episode, but I want to use an analogy here. How many of you have either played Final Fantasy II or watched me play Final Fantasy II? I've done it at least 3 times on camera. Because there's the marathon, the lore run, and the review. I've gotten pretty familiar with FF2 at this point. Let me explain what I'm talking about. FF2 has a concept called troll rooms. Now, what a troll room is you're going through a dungeon, and there's 8 doors. Which door do you go in? Well, 7 of those doors lead you into an empty room where you have a higher chance of getting an encounter, and you're teleported to the middle of the room, not the door, so that you have a better chance of getting that encounter as you are leaving the room, and there's nothing else in there. Now, Pro Jared used this analogy too, and I'm pretty sure I did as well. That is like a child, a kid, who thinks they're good at dungeon design. No chest. Who thinks they're good at dungeon design and isn't. Like, that's pretty much exactly the idea of childishness. Not because everyone assumes childishness has to do with attitude, and it certainly does, but it also has to do with their presumptions of how good they are. Yeah, the gotcha thing. So he does this several times. The first example is the That twig, super ancient thing. Oh, nope. Gotcha. That's childish, because it's not clever. It's not good dungeon design. It's not a good prank, but they're so self-congratulatory about it, because they think they're just that awesome. That's childish, and we're going to cover a few more of those as we go. So then we have a montage. Okay, so Pinkie is trying a little bit too hard, but okay, I can see why. She obviously is very invested in making this work. Still, she obviously lies to them several times to try and make them happy, but you know, that's getting into some gray lines. The montage also establishes their general activities, which will be important later. Also, continuity counter, they had the perfect balance of vanilla extract. I'm sorry, that actually got a grin out of me. That absolutely gets a continuity counter. Idle comment. Now this is funny. I was just watching the episode, and sometimes I'll just type as thoughts occur to me. And I'm typing, you know, my thoughts here, and I was like, I wonder if snow slides or snow, you know, avalanches, whatever, are a semi-common thing. I mean, they live in the snowy mountains, right? That'd be the kind of thing you're used to. This was then immediately followed by a scene of him obviously lying about the fact that they happen all the time, and they totally have methods to deal with this. Now, this might be bad writing, if we're being honest with ourselves, because what this implies is that these kind of snowslides never happen. Or at the very least, they are so rare that they don't have any idea how to deal with it. So, we have two possibilities here. Either these large creatures who stomp all the time somehow don't cause these avalanches all the time. And what? Or, now this is actually a much more amusing idea to me, or normally they are so careful because of the threat of avalanche, and that then leads to the problem of the fact that Prince Rutherford is probably the worst commanding officer, leader I have ever seen in this entire show. Because the only reason they did this was because he told them to stomp harder, heedless of cost. Huh. We'll come back to that. So... God, Triaxia. She probably could. Oh yeah, he was trying to impress Pinkie. But, well, I mean, we all do stupid and foolish things. That's just part of being a person, but he then immediately doubles down and is stubborn. Two other very childish traits. No, this is normal. I once saw a child who was reaching in and stealing a cookie, and someone was like, did you take one of the cookies? And I want to stress this, the child had the cookie in their hand. And their response was to say, no, I'm not taking a cookie. I didn't steal a cookie. Now, I could go into the psychology of this, but this is a very childish thing, and most of us grow out of this over time. This is doubling down because you're afraid of consequence, is what that boils down to. Oh God, I can't get in trouble, but it's okay. If I say I'm not doing it, I'm not getting in trouble. And so you just commit to the lie as hard as you can, and what actually happens is you end up making it worse. I've actually had this discussion with my niece multiple times. If you screw up, that sucks, but if you lie about it, that's worse, because now we can't deal with it. Right? And yeah, it compounds. It's a great way to put that. It actually makes the whole problem worse. I have actually had to have a rather stern lecture with my niece, not because she screwed up and did something wrong, but because she lied about it. And I made it very clear I was not upset at her for accidentally breaking the I forget what it was. It was like this face-looking thing. That's whatever. That's replaceable. But the fact that you lied about it is what I'm upset about. So he does this constantly. I'm not going to enumerate every single example, but he does this constantly the entire episode. He does this kind of doubling down, stubborn lying over and over and over. Next point. Wow, Loner, that's terrible. That is the worst advice I've ever heard. Have you ever tried to shovel a lot of snow? Like a lot of snow? Because I have. I've lived in Colorado. And Kansas. Yeah, that's some backbreaking work. And the best part about it is you're shoveling and you're shoveling and you're shoveling. You spend a couple hours on it and it's just, oh my god. You look up and it looks like you've barely made a dent, right? If you've never shoveled snow, I actually have another analogy. Have you ever played Minecraft? Or any building game? How many of you have spent literally hours mining the necessary things and carving out the hole and just, oh my god, you've been working on it meticulously and carefully over and over and over, and you're finally done and you look back and it looks like you've done nothing and you want to show it off to someone and it's like, hey, here's my house that took me 3 hours to build. And yeah, it's this. It's like a 10 by 10 house. 10 by 10 by 8 or whatever, yeah, you know? And it's like, that's it. That's all I've accomplished. I've actually got a recent example for you. So, we're actually really, really close to being done with the yard work, at least as done as we're getting for now. One of the things we had to do is we had to move some bricks. Clay bricks, right? Now, I'm going to pause here, because anybody paying attention or anybody who's done this is probably going, oh my god, that's horrible. And anybody who doesn't understand or knows is like, okay, and? It took us a substantial chunk of time to move these freaking bricks. And we had a wagon, too. But the funny thing is, the first time we loaded up the wagon, it was too full, and we had to start emptying the wagon, because a brick isn't all that heavy. But 30 bricks is, and we couldn't move the wagon. Anyways, this is exactly the kind of thing that's running through my head while I see them pushing through the snow. Because I've shoveled snow before, and I look at that like, oh god, that's not getting done, even in a few days. That is a colossal amount of snow. And keep in mind, they have to shovel it like out of the town, right? Out of the little the palisade. So it's like shovel, dump, shovel, dump, and then do that 7,000 times. Obviously they don't have shovels because they're yaks, but you get my point. Pinkie, so yeah, so credit where credit is due. Pinkie's first thought, you know what, let's get more people. And that is absolutely valid. Those bricks I just mentioned, if it wasn't just me, Sis is pregnant to the point where she can't actually help with the physical labor, so she was just keeping me company. If it wasn't just me moving those bricks, that actually wouldn't have been that big of a deal. Because that's straight math at that point, right? We both do half the work. The work is done, you know, with half the total effort, and we're good, right? So you bring in 50 people, and all of a sudden that job is a joke, right? Now, 50 is an exaggeration, but you do get my point. It's the very concept of what a factory is mathematically applying this idea. Rather than building a thing, you have 50 things building a thing, and then you smash it together. Yeah, no kidding. Breakwin, because that's 16,000. Good lord, I only moved a few hundred, and that was terrible. Anyways. So she's like, let's go get people. Cool. No. Now, this is when I'm going to answer Trihexia's question. I wasn't ignoring you. You like to repeat yourself, Trihexia. I can see your question. Right, it's right there. It's still on my screen. Yes, I have worked with people this stubborn and childish and foolish multiple points in my life. Thankfully, at one point in time, I was actually in a position of authority when I was a manager at Arby's, when I was working with someone like this. I told them to knock it the hell off, or they were fired. Now, I actually had no real intention of firing them over this, but the reason I said it that way was because that provided a shock to the system. That made them realize that I was actually serious about this, and they quit it. So my strategy worked. For the record, if they hadn't quit it, I would have absolutely fired them. Because, as I said before, that nonsense just makes it worse. It compounds the problem. Was I ever that stubborn as a kid? Yeah, I was. To my incredible dismay and shame, I did have that phase. I could even tell you when it was. It was, oh, absolutely, Ross. He was actually kind of scared of me. Don't worry, I smoothed it over. You know me, I could get along with people. But You know, for at least a couple weeks there, he was just over there doing his job and not really talking to me. And finally, I was like, all right, dude. Hey, how you doing? He was just like, oh, yeah, I'm doing okay. I don't know, you've been looking a little down lately. Everything going all right? And I just kind of made small talk with him and kind of pried him out of his shell a little bit. It was okay. But anyways, I'm getting off topic. Point being, for a surprisingly horrible part of my life, brief but horrible, that's the only thing I've got, is it was relatively short. I was a really bad liar. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I am a bad liar, as in I cannot lie well. Like, I do not have the capacity to say, I'm Elvis, and sell you on it. I can't do that. My deception score is terrible. But I lied constantly. If you asked me why right now, I couldn't give you an answer. I don't even like lying, and I don't like lying in general for reasons I've literally just discussed. I have no idea where that came from. Mum called me on it, hard. Lord Mum, it's like, what the hell? I literally just watched you do this, and you're saying you didn't do this. And I remember a distinct moment. We were going to the dentist. And it was something so stupid. That's why it stuck with me. She was asking me... She said something like, don't bite your nails, which is a habit I still have, actually, to this day. And I said, instinctually and instantly, I don't bite my nails. See you around, Darth Medoro. Hope to see you in the VOD. I said, I don't bite my nails. And she's like, you literally just bought your nails. I just watched you do it. And that exact instance stuck with me really hard. Because she was right. I was lying about something so stupid to lie about when it was so provable that it was wrong. And I put the effort and mentality into forcing that to stop happening. Because that's dumb at that point. But yes, I was that kid. That was actually a teenager range, but still, point remaining. So, this then gets to him doubling down, and he actually gets to the point of threatening Pinkie Pie. Now, I don't mean physically threatening. It's like, we will kick you out, and we'll revoke your official status and all that fun stuff. This is when he starts to lose me a little bit. Because now he's starting to get a little bit of a dick. And so Pinkie goes along with it because, of course, she really doesn't want to lose that. This is important to her, as we earlier discussed. Side note, am I the only one whose teeth physically hurt at the very thought of eating snow? You know, snow, yeah, you know, you put a bit on your tongue, you let it dissolve or whatever, right? Sure, but no, they don't do that. They go, ah! Think about that for a second. Picture it. You know, imagine for a moment. Ah! Ugh. Anyways, scroll down a little bit. So, then we see montage number 2. Same activities as before, now with snow. Yep, nope, this is why the earlier montage existed. Also, yeah, it's the perfect amount of cold and water. This then leads to the part where this episode starts to horrify me a little bit. Because we skip to 2 kids who are hungry to the point where their stomachs are rumbling. And one of them is like, oh, I'm hungry. And the other one says, shh, you don't want Rutherford to hear you. Okay. And then the other one admits, I'm hungry too, but we can't go against the prince. From this point onwards, I started to notice a trend. Immediately after this, Pinkie tells her obviously fake story. Meta commentary, her Aesop is a little bit too obvious, although at least her Aesop doesn't destroy her own point with exaggeration. Anyways, everyone there loves her story. This is important. If they pay attention, all the other yaks present are like, oh yeah, good story, good story. And then they all smile and nod as she's going through what are the Aesops, right? Is it asking for help is good? Is it friendship is awesome? And they're all like, yeah, yeah. And then Rutherford jumps in and says, D, goats weak and horrible. Magic bovines need to stay out of goats' business. And all of the other yaks immediately, upon seeing that, go back to frowning. How many of you even noticed that? Because they're all smiling at Pinkie's story, and the moment Rutherford contradicted it, they go right back to frowning. Hang on, I'm not done yet. Pinkie's like, anybody else have any other ideas? And all the other yaks look at each other or look at the prince, and then don't say anything because they're afraid to... This is a tyranny. This is a straight-up tyranny. I mean, obviously it's a dictatorship because one person's in charge. That's the only definition of a dictatorship. But this is an actual tyrannical situation. I'm sure that it's not intended, except at the same time, it almost has to be because all of the signs are there and they go out of their way to visually showcase this kind of tyrannical behavior. The kid who's starving and afraid to contradict the prince? The people who disagree with him but are afraid to say anything about it? Horn bump in agreement. Bonk. This... I hate to agree with Ogre because I disagree with him on everything, but I'm kidding. But yeah, no, this is absolute power based on lack of qualification, or rather, based on anything other than qualification. So then she's like, okay, yeah, no, I'll go along with this, right? But after a point, she calls him on it again. Now, the reason I say I'm nicer on this episode than I used to be, because it probably sounds up like I'm being pretty negative here, is Pinkie is actually pretty universally in character this whole time. There's no character assassination here. There's this wonderful bit where Rutherford gives his own Aesop. I was stuck there, and I made it out all on my own. Pinkie then completely tears the Aesop apart. This amuses me, because not only is he obviously BSing, but she's kind of making a point I've made before many times. What is the difference between a story and a tale? Now, for those of you who don't know to answer that question, I'll go ahead and answer you. A story is supposed to be something that is internally self-consistent, something that you could see actually happening, as I like to put it. A tale is there to tell a point. It doesn't have to be internally consistent because that's not the point of the tale. Most Aesops are not internally consistent. Most Aesops do not make sense, and most Aesops fall apart the moment you think about it. Now that's okay. That is by design, because the whole point of the Aesop, the whole point of the tale, is to get across a point, usually a morality play, but there can be other things too. And this is why I make such a clear distinction between story and tale, because if you analyze a tale as if it's a story, then you will shred it just like Pinkie did to his. Because it doesn't make sense. Because it doesn't line up, because that wouldn't work that way, and this wouldn't work that way, and yada yada yada, right? The thing is, stories are supposed to make sense, and the overwhelming majority of fiction is a story, not a tale. So I tend to shred them because they don't make sense. But moving on. Pinkie's? Ironically, Pinkie's was a tale, it just happened to make perfect sense. Because all she was doing was telling what actually happened, while, what is it, Control-R-ing, I think? Each of the names. You know, find, replace, and that's it. Find, replace, find, replace, find, replace. So technically she was telling a tale, it just happened to make perfect sense, because it was just... Once upon a time, there was a streamer named Lauren, and Lauren was talking about My Little Pony on camera. Lauren was kind of warm because it was summertime, and Lauren was having difficulty with that. But then, Lauren came up with a great idea to change the flow of the fans so that Lauren could stay cooler, and you get the idea here. So, Pinkie goes back and plays 20 million questions. That hurts me just seeing that. Rutherford is actually sad that Pinkie is gone when she leaves, which is interesting. And then orders people to agree with him. He actually orders them to horn bump in agreement. He is a tyrant, I'm sorry. This has officially stopped being funny at this point. So here's where things get interesting. This is where I'm willing to be a lot more nice on the episode, because pretty much from this point onwards, up till this point, the Yaks can go to hell, right? Or at least Rutherford. Sorry, that's unfair. Rutherford could go for hell. If this was an episode of Star Trek, at about this point in the episode, I would be advocating that the crew of the Enterprise beam Rutherford into space and then beam down to help these people. Here's what ends up happening. This is actually a legitimately good dilemma and concept. Hear me out. Helping people is easy, right? The answer, of course, is no. Helping people is not easy. It is extremely complex and a very dynamic and nuanced topic. This is actually the specific reason why the Prime Directive pisses me off so much. Because the Prime Directive specifically is designed to prevent thinking when it comes to helping people. Instead of actually thinking at the situation and going, and thinking about how you should apply what to this specific situation with these specific situations or scenarios. Instead, you just look at a piece of paper and say, oh, well, the piece of paper says to do this, and you shut your brain off and do that. So that sucks, right? Nevertheless, how do you help someone that doesn't want help? How do you help someone that doesn't actually ask for help? That is a surprisingly nuanced topic, really. Because it boils down to judging whether or not they need the help, if they're being stubborn, if they have a legitimate reason not to seek help, etc. This also has very serious real-life applications, because this dips into the morality and ethics of helping someone who self-harms or is suicidal. How do you help someone who is actively refusing help? Should you help someone who is actively refusing help? Yeah, no kidding, Ross. Now, again, I'm not, just to make sure about this, I'm not saying universally you should, and I'm not saying universally you shouldn't, because that's against the entire point I'm trying to make. The whole point is you should think about it in the specific moment with those specific circumstances. Think, use the brain, and process and deal with it on a case-by-case basis, right? To always say yes or always say no is both the opposite of thinking. Are both the opposite of thinking. So unfortunately, the episode doesn't really develop this idea. It just presents it briefly. Now, and then in this case, it's like, And what Pinkie decides to do is to help them without telling them. You know, I'm going to help you, and I'm going to do it without your know-how, without your knowledge. This also applies quite a bit when it comes to people who self-harm or are suicidal, in ways I'm probably not going to go into detail on, if you'll forgive me. But nevertheless, that's the approach she decides to use in this circumstance. This then leads to something I never caught before, and another Trek thing I'm going to bring up briefly. Let's talk about the Trek thing first, because that's easier. Anybody who watched my ruminations on early TNG knows that one of my biggest pet peeves of early TNG is not the insanity or the weird garish costumes or the fact that every race is just humans, even though they're not called humans. No. What really bothered me about early TNG was the fact that it was apparently... No, it's not Wesley. Wesley only irritated me like twice. Yeah, it's the no balls diplomacy. It's what I call bend over backwards diplomacy. I will... yes, please walk over me. I am nothing but a doormat. And the Federation applied that diplomatic approach consistently throughout early TNG. It actually crops up later, too, but early TNG was the worst. And I hate that, because, as I described in Star Trek, that's not diplomacy. That is actually in opposition to the concept of diplomacy. If all you do is say everything and do everything that you're told, you're not being diplomatic, you're being a doormat. Now, that being said, that they don't go that far in this. But once again, this is another topic the episode brings up without bringing up. Because it boils down to... Yes, it does, Aseros. It boils down to the idea, or the question, if you will. At what point is respecting someone else's culture... I'm saying that wrong. At what point does respecting someone else's culture go too far? Because, on the one hand, respecting other people is cool. It's rad. Let's do it. But I am a firm believer in the idea of the concept of within reason. And if there was a culture, if this was a Star Trek episode, and there were people who refused the help and were going to die from it, to me, I think that would be a line. Like for me, that would be a, okay, I'll respect your culture and all. And I will, try to be tolerant and understanding and respectful, because that's me. But you're all going to die if you don't ask for help, or if you don't get help and you don't want help, so screw you, here's some help. Oh, we hate you forever. Okay, I'll live with that. You're alive to hate me. Now, that was something I will ensure that your culture is still going to be here tomorrow. You're welcome. And then they go to war with me and I laugh because they're a planet-bound system and I'm the Federation. But anyways, my point is, I do think there are limits to respecting culture. Now, the thing is, I had this whole speech prepared about respecting limits and respecting culture and how gray that gets, especially in real life. And, yeah, Justice actually does touch on this very specific topic, believe it or not. And then I realized that that's not actually the point the episode makes. I had apparently misremembered that, because again, remember, I've only seen these episodes once from this point onwards. And instead, it brings up the idea briefly, but doesn't actually address it, and the Yaks are not that bad. And Weouds has already explained why. The Yaks do have a cultural problem here. Problem's probably the wrong word, but whatever. And that cultural problem is we can't ask for help. We can accept help, and that's a key distinction. We can accept help, and we will be grateful for the help when it is given. But we can't ask for it. We cannot lower ourselves to that. We cannot diminish ourselves to that. That's not a line, by contrast to my earlier comparison. The made-up example I made about the people who would die if I didn't help them, for them, their culture was we can't accept help. That's ridiculous. But we can't ask for help. The cultural pride thing, the saving face thing. Okay. Yeah, no, I can actually buy that. And yeah, as S.A. Ross points out, Rutherford is actually legitimately happy and grateful for the help. After all, he needed it, and he knew it. A culture that can ask for help and not accept it? We'll just shoot them all. There, they're all dead. Problem solved. I'm kidding. I have no idea. But yes, because once again, Pinkie actually understood how to approach this diplomatically. So let me say that sentence again in a different way. Pinkie Pie in this episode is a better diplomat than Picard is in Season 1 of TNG. And I'm not joking about that. You can quote me. Yeah, exactly, Braven. So yeah, the conclusion, for once, the conclusion of the episode, rather than damaging it, actually brought it up substantially, in my opinion. This is why I'm not so pissed off about this episode, and why I do think this is still an enjoyable bit. Because the whole point was Pinkie was actually trying to get them to accept help by getting them to ask... I'm saying this wrong, sorry. Pinkie spent most of the episode trying to get them to ask for help. She failed at this because culture, pride, childishness. So she decides, okay, we will go help. We will just do it without their knowledge. And then they are very grateful to that because she accurately read their overall take. And they were then very grateful for the help. Thank you very much. You are now, once again, an honorary pony. Here's the helmet. Here are 3 wah-wahs in a row. By the way, did you catch that? There's literally 3 wah-wahs in a row at the end. I'm counting all 3 of those. This is a wah-wah barrage. Just bam, bam, bam. So actually up to here on that, and the continuity counter goes up to here. I mean, yeah, no, that fits Weirds. And that is the kind of thing I can not only get behind, but actually makes perfect sense, doesn't go too far, isn't stupid, etc., right? Now, someone, I think it was Weirds, mentioned the idea that maybe Prince Rutherford has been placed in charge of this village to help him grow the hell up, right? You know, because this is where they're doing Fest, but this one tiny village with like 20 yaks, this isn't the whole of the yak people, right? Right? So, it is entirely feasible that Mr. Rutherford has been assigned here to get him to grow the hell up. Food for thought. I actually thought about that too, Baron. You know, he's prince instead of queen. Or king, excuse me. But then I remember that they have their whole anti-queen thing. I mean, so far we've had, what, one king? Two, I think, actually. Because they like to do that. They like to avoid queens, and they like to avoid kings, unless they're bad guys, which, that's the Disney thing right there, which I've never agreed with, by the way. So that's the episode. I think it's everything I wanted to talk about. I was all ready to rant about how terrible this episode was, and then it ended up not being terrible. How dare you? How do we rate this one? If that's the whole of Yakyakistan, they're probably going to die inside of a generation. Because, whew. I mean, Ponyville has literally hundreds of ponies we have seen on camera, and thus can presume there's even more. That's how fiction usually works, right? The idea that there's like 12 yaks ever anywhere is kind of terrifying. Then again, maybe he was that much of a tyrant and they're all dead now. To be completely honest, I was going to argue for blue until I saw the episode, obviously. And it just kind of kept drifting further up into it. Yeah, Lindblom effect is the opposite of SNES effect. Or MMO scale is another way to put that. I'm actually leaning towards yellow on this one. Don't mistake me, it's a decent episode. It's just, it is average. It doesn't have anything really great, and it doesn't have anything really bad. It's just kind of there. It does some good stuff. And the two major talking points it could have brought up, it actually didn't. So it doesn't get credit for those. Which is fine, again. That also makes this one of the better one-off episodes we've had, because most of the one-off episodes we have are green. And possibly below green, depending on how you want to define that. We've had a lot of green lately. One orange.